Hello Internet, and welcome to Atrophy of Souls Top 10 Games of 2013. 2013 was an interesting year for gaming as it was a transitional period between two console generations. And while that transition will continue to occur over the course of 2014, 2013 will likely be the final year that the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 are regarded as machines worthy of any particular merit by the gaming media. Of course, those of us with even a modicum of sagacity understand that this is an exceptional time for these machines, because while everyone is clamoring for the next gen, some of the most unique, interesting, and stellar titles will fly under the radar and into relative obscurity during this pivotal point in time. Do not let these amazing experiences pass you by because of the alluring artifice produced by the next generation. Even though the next gen consoles are technically on the market, the titles that push the envelope for these machines are a long way off, so don't bother going out of your way to acquire one of these extravagant paperweights just yet. Unless it's a Wii U, of course. Now that my little rant is over, let's delve into my top 10 games of 2013. I'm sure that my list will vary immensely from the status quo, likely because my tastes tend to be somewhat eclectic. If you want a 2013 top games list that consists of the likes of Call of Duty, Battlefield, BioShock, or Grand Theft Auto, you've come to the wrong place, my friend. So be sure to hit the like button on your way out and tell IGN hello for me. I will also not be including my favorite handheld games in this top 10, however I will outline my favorites at the very end of this video, so be sure to check that out. Now without further ado, here are my choices. While technically not a full release, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon has the distinct pleasure of surpassing its progenitor in every possible way, and is in my opinion the best first-person shooter release in 2013. Stylistically, Blood Dragon draws excessive inspiration from the entertainment industry of the 80s and 90s, drenched in cultural references ranging from classic action films like Terminator and RoboCop, to tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons, and even the didactic disclaimers placed into every arcade game of the era warning us that winners don't do drugs. Blood Dragon is a surprisingly well-constructed and ambient experience tailor-made to gamers who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and will have you laughing out loud due to how justifiably over the top it is. Featuring what is likely the greatest tutorial sequence ever presented in a game, Blood Dragon pulls no punches when exposing modern FPS tropes with a cynical attitude that is as humorous as it is genuine. Leading by example, Blood Dragon scraps the tone, setting, and themes presented in Far Cry 3 to become something far more unique, humorous, and memorable. Taking the gameplay of Far Cry 3 and injecting it with a fair dose of machismo, adrenaline, and flair, Blood Dragon is an experience that isn't encumbered by the limits of its contemporaries. There are no stamina bars, there's no health regen, and you are given the freedom to tackle missions in any way that you so choose. Blood Dragon is an absolute joy to play and look at, and has the potential to become a successful franchise in its own right. If you have yet to play Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon and have even a passing interest in the FPS genre, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by not downloading Blood Dragon right now, or at least after this video is over, of course. The Dark Knight returns in this prequel to 2009's Batman Arkham Asylum. Following a younger, angrier, and more arrogant Batman, Arkham Origins provides fans with a lot more of the same, and that's not necessarily to the game's detriment. Since the formula hasn't undergone any drastic changes, the core gameplay experience isn't hindered by any myopic design choices used only for the sake of distinguishing Origins from its predecessors. Arkham Origins is an Arkham game through and through, and feels almost identical to Batman Arkham City, so if you enjoyed that game, you'll definitely have a lot of fun here as you acquire new gadgets, take down legions of thugs, and solve mysteries using Detective Mode's new crime scene function. Batman's encounters with the numerous assassins over the course of the campaign is where the game truly shines. These moments are visceral, cinematic, and overwhelmingly engaging. However, these moments are also where Origin's inability to innovate are most pernicious. While the boss battles are fun to play and look at initially, they quickly devolved into tedious and lethargic wars of attrition that delude the impact of the tight choreography that satiates these encounters. Arkham Origins is also the least polished of all the Arkham games and suffers from more than its fair share of humorous and infuriating glitches. In spite of several blemishes, Arkham Origins is exciting, satisfying, and most importantly replayable, with a wealth of post-game content that will keep you occupied for hours on end. If it weren't for the excessive DLC, glitches, and the overall complacency of the developers regarding the core experience, Arkham Origins may have been higher on this list. However, as it stands currently, Batman can sit snugly at number 9 until Rocksteady Studios decides to reveal the true successor to the stellar Arkham City. Following the story of Jody Holmes, who has since birth been linked to an ethereal entity known as Aiden, Beyond Two Souls brilliantly succeeds in making you, the player, an integral component in its narrative. Since Aiden is an amorphous entity, its character is shaped by you, the player. However, Aiden is far more than a simple avatar for player choice, as Aiden is quite literally player consciousness actualized within the narrative. When Jody speaks to Aiden, she's speaking directly to you, the player, whilst completely circumventing the fourth wall through sensible writing. This clever thematic element gives players a far more genuine connection to Jody as she reacts to player action in kind, immersing us further into the experience and eliciting paternal/maternal instincts from players regarding the character. We may not always agree with Jody's actions, but we are compelled to protect her because she trusts us unconditionally and would be absolutely helpless without us. While Beyond Two Souls does some clever things with its narrative, the game mechanics that it is comprised of are in and of themselves shallow and mediocre. The gameplay on display here is about as simplistic as a video game can be. Nonetheless, the mechanics aren't insulting since this title focuses more so on its themes and producing a cinematic experience than rich and varied gameplay. Beyond Two Souls is successful in producing an interactive film that leaves just enough context for players to be satisfied once the credits finally roll. It's definitely not for everyone, but I enjoyed the experience immensely and am looking forward to whatever Quantic Dream produces next. Structured very much like a side-scrolling beat-em-up, Dragon's Crown is an action RPG that features beautiful hand-drawn artwork, rich character depth, and satisfying gameplay mechanics that are as addictive as they are rewarding. Taking place in the Kingdom of Hydeland, the plot revolves around the coveted Dragon's Crown, a legendary relic that possesses mysterious power. As one of several characters, it will be up to you to acquire the Dragon's Crown before it falls into the wrong hands by exploring dungeons, abandoned castles, and ancient ruins, and defeating giant monsters, ghosts, and a variety of other fantasy creatures along the way. Each of the 6 heroes have a unique set of abilities that would be unlocked as you level up, all of which help in distinguishing each of the classes just enough from one another to warrant multiple playthroughs. Building your character over the course of the campaign is deeply satisfying and fun, especially when you have a few friends to join you on your quest. Dragon's Crown features both local and online co-op for the campaign, making the experience much more gratifying, as traveling through the beautifully realized dungeons and towns with a friend or two is definitely the best way to play through the game. While the gameplay is definitely fluid and responsive, it can sometimes be easy to lose your character on screen when these massive melees become particularly hectic. This is especially apparent during boss battles, which can produce some of the most chaotic and awe-inspiring challenges in the entire experience. The hand-drawn artwork is especially impressive during boss battles, as the large detailed monsters animate beautifully. This isn't only true for the bosses, however, as each and every character has been painstakingly handcrafted. It's apparent that this title had a lot of passion poured into it by the developers, very much to the game's benefit. Dragon's Crown feels like a logical progression to the beat-em-up genre, which has been largely forgotten in this industry up until this point. With the inclusion of RPG elements, branching story paths through player choice, varied characters, fluid gameplay mechanics, beautiful artwork, and frenetic co-op, Dragon's Crown is a visual feast that should not be missed by fans of old-school beat-em-ups. Likely the most novel and unique experience of 2013, the wonderful 101 features gameplay that is as demanding as it is rewarding. There has never been a game that plays quite like the wonderful 101, as it requires players to draw shapes by using the Wii U touchscreen. This may feel somewhat cumbersome initially, however after successfully morphing your horde of heroes into guns, swords, and giant fists of doom, the touchscreen becomes an organic extension of the controller as you dynamically switch between drawing shapes and using the analog sticks and face buttons to attack the large number of enemies on screen. Learning and mastering the many forms and abilities that the heroes have at their disposal is fun and challenging, as the game does a great job of throwing new obstacles your way and switching up the level design just enough to make things feel fresh. Despite of its colorful and vibrant characters and settings, this game is unapologetically challenging and is an absolute joy for players such as myself who feel rewarded by mastering a game's core mechanics. An amalgamation of Devil May Cry, Pikmin, and Beautiful Joe, the wonderful 101 is stylish, endearing, and over the top. Very reminiscent to Saturday morning cartoons, the story is cheesy yet absolutely captivating and charming. It's hard not to feel like a kid again as you hear characters shout out attack names and gesture violently before unleashing their abilities. Platinum Games once again demonstrates why they're one of the most creative, original, and necessary developers in the video game industry, as they continue to produce unique experiences that challenge current industry trends whilst pushing the medium forward with deep and novel gameplay mechanics. Featuring what is by far the greatest story that 2013 produced, Naughty Dog has successfully constructed a title that critically and unapologetically depicts the human condition through rich and layered characters, settings, and themes. The Last of Us is an absolutely stunning achievement of interactive storytelling, as every iota of the game world reflects the themes of sacrifice, hope, and fate, and carry enough subtext to be analyzed far after the credits rolled. Through the homogenization of survival and horror elements, The Last of Us produces an intense and deeply satisfying experience. Sneaking through dilapidated buildings, scavenging for ammo, and evading grotesquely malformed creatures can be overwhelmingly unnerving, and the protracted violence produced by the death animations only help in serving the pervasive feeling of dread that this title elicits. The Last of Us is very reminiscent to survival horror games of previous console generations, wherein ammunition and resources are scarce. Your actions must be thought out accordingly, every bullet counts, and enemies are plentiful. While the majority of the combat scenarios in The Last of Us are satisfying and brutal, the gameplay itself can become quite repetitive as puzzles and enemies are recycled assiduously. The game also has a wealth of technical issues that can ruin immersion, the most apparent of these being your AI teammates and their erratic behavior. To compensate for your capricious AI teammates, Naughty Dog decided to make enemies unaware of your compatriots until you have been spotted. This can cause some of the most intense and visceral sequences in the game to become unintentionally hilarious due to teammates walking directly into enemies and caressing them without consequence. In spite of some technical hiccups, The Last of Us is one of the greatest achievements of the 7th console generation, due in large part to how masterfully written it is. If you're a lover of story and video games, do not miss the chance to experience this excellent title that is pervasively macabre, overwhelmingly fulfilling, and unabashedly poignant. The final game in the Future series, and likely one of the most overlooked games of 2013, Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus returns the series to its roots with a heavy emphasis on unique weaponry and gravity manipulation. The formula hasn't undergone too many changes, and that is definitely to the benefit of the experience, as the prior two titles in the series, while fun, didn't live up to the core shooting and platforming mechanics that the main series has been known for. As the game progresses, you will gain access to new and more devastating weapons of mass destruction for Ratchet to wield. Each of the weapons can be leveled with use, giving you incentive to experiment with various means of dispatching enemies in battle. Each of the weapons can also be modded in addition to the leveling system, adding various secondary effects to weapons, making them feel even more powerful. The Ratchet and Clank games have always done an excellent job with giving players a unique sense of empowerment. While these titles can be challenging in their own right through various arena battles and higher difficulties, the sense of absolute control that you are given during combat scenarios is something that other titles with far more realistic motifs fail to provide. Destroying hordes of enemies as bolts rain down on you is still one of the most satisfying experiences that can be provided by a video game, and is for some reason something that I never tire of. While Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus isn't the most artistically resonant title on this list, it does something that many of the more intellectual titles in this industry fail to provide almost unanimously by being an engaging and fun video game at its core. While pushing the medium forward through enthralling storytelling, characters, and settings can definitely produce titles of artistic merit, games are first and foremost about their gameplay, and regardless of what a story consists of, if your gameplay is tight, responsive, layered, and engaging, players will be captivated by your game in spite of its thematic elements. In order for the medium to evolve further, games must be able to communicate their themes not through sterile cutscenes, but through moment-to-moment gameplay that the player themselves are able to take part in. While The Last of Us produced one of the best stories I've ever experienced in the medium, as a video game it isn't as fun or addictive as something like Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus. This isn't to say that The Last of Us isn't an excellent title in its own right, but it is to say that this industry still has plenty of room for improvement in regards to theming. Successfully melding the atmosphere of the early titles in the franchise with the gameplay mechanics of later entries, Resident Evil Revelations is a return to form for the ailing franchise that lost its identity somewhere in the midst of RE6's development. With a far greater emphasis on exploration, puzzle solving, and survival, Revelations places players in the role of Jill Valentine as she investigates a seemingly abandoned cruise ship known as the SS Queen Zenobia in search of Chris Redfield. Since Revelations is a port of a handheld game, the story is segmented into various chapters that elucidate the mystery surrounding the Queen Zenobia in non-linear fashion. The story itself is what you would expect from the series. It's cheesy and somewhat over the top, but it's nonetheless entertaining and fun without overstaying its welcome. While the gameplay in Revelations is very reminiscent of Resident Evil 4 and 5, the core design philosophy is more akin to the earlier titles in the franchise. Weapons cannot be upgraded, enemies are large, grotesque, and imposing, and ammunition is scarce. Boss battles are intimidating and effectively unnerving as the creatures moan and cry for help as battles progress, effectively producing a sense of guilt and remorse in you, the player. It's a really small touch, but its implementation is absolutely haunting, and I'd love to see it expanded upon in future entries in the series. Resident Evil Revelations is definitely not a perfect game, but the experience that it provides is an absolute triumph for the series as it is fun, haunting, and infinitely replayable. With the addition of Raid Mode, which can be tackled solo or with a friend, you'll be playing this game for hours on end as you level up while unlocking new weapons, characters, and abilities. Raid Mode is almost a complete game in and of itself, and will definitely put all of your BOW slaying skills to the test. If you passed up Resident Evil Revelations due to the poorly constructed and unfocused disappointment that was Resident Evil 6, I urge you to give it a try. While it leaves plenty of room for improvement, Resident Evil Revelations is a game with veneration for the series and its legacy, and should not be missed by longtime fans of the franchise. Crafted by some of the most talented and creative designers in the industry, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is a game that's absolutely brimming with minutia and style. Featuring a robust combat system that is satisfying, frenetic, and layered, Rising will have you enthralled with its deep combat mechanics, epic boss battles, and stellar music. The boss battles are definitely the strongest aspect of this game, as each boss is distinct in method and execution, and every single battle is memorable and challenging. The dynamic soundtrack that accompanies these encounters accentuates the chaos on screen, making you truly feel as though you're an unstoppable force to be reckoned with. While Rising is definitely a deeply flawed game, which I outlined in my review that can be seen here, in spite of all of its shortcomings, it is one of the most memorable, addictive, and challenging experiences that 2013 produced. I won't say much else about Rising since I made an entire video devoted to it, but it is a game that should not be missed if you are a fan of the action hack and slash genre. Somehow, against all odds, Ninja Theory succeeded in producing an experience that melds a rich story with the deepest and most intricate gameplay ever produced for a title in recent memory. DMC Devil May Cry is the most amazing, engrossing, intellectual, and thoughtful game that you will ever play in.
That's a letdown.
Sorry about that.
What a punk.
Taking the best elements from the 2D and 3D games and melding them into a title that is as unique as it is familiar, Super Mario 3D World is a cleverly crafted pastiche that evolves beyond the sum of its parts, creating one of the greatest platformers ever to grace the medium. With dynamic and creative level design that rewards exploration and quick reflexes, Super Mario 3D World is a masterpiece of game design that will consistently surprise, challenge, and impress you with each of its excellently crafted courses. The addition of co-op as well as characters that play distinctly from one another make for some genuinely intriguing and memorable moments throughout the experience. 3D World is absolutely brimming with content, as there are about 380 stars and 85 stamps to locate over the course of the campaign, as well as a wealth of hidden worlds and stages to conquer. These stages are some of the most challenging in the series' history and will put your platforming skills and patience to their absolute breaking point. While 3D World is definitely an excellent game, it does have a few shortcomings. Sometimes the camera can be somewhat of a nuisance. It can also be hard to tell exactly where your character is positioned on the map from time to time, leading to some unintentional deaths. Some of the more challenging levels are also exacerbated immensely by the number of players and will likely have to be tackled solo unless your co-op partners are particularly adept with platforming games. Beyond these minor shortcomings, Super Mario 3D World is an absolute masterpiece and is the best reason to invest in the Wii U console if you haven't already done so. It is a game that should be played by everyone and is by far my favorite game released in 2013. With that said, I hope that you all enjoyed my top 10 games of 2013. Be sure to leave a comment below letting me know your thoughts on these titles as well as your choices. I'm definitely interested in hearing what the rest of you thought about 2013 and the experiences that it provided. Thank you all very much for watching, and now I will leave you with a list of my favorite handheld games of the year.